there is this standoff at the border that continues. Greg Abbott just posturing for political reasons, defying the Supreme Court's temporary request as they look into the case for Greg Abbott to stop constructing razor wire on property, the border, that is supposedly the federal government. I mean, it is the federal government's property. This is the jurisdiction of the federal government. It's quite clearly delineated in the Constitution, although we're about to see how Greg Abbott makes his case here. They are continuing to use immigration as a political cudgel against Biden. That is going to be, I think, the central attack from the Republicans and from Trump heading into the election. And so they have to inflate the threat of people coming across the border seeking asylum. This is the kind of thing that happens, right? There are temporary crackdowns on the border. Immigration kind of slows down for a bit. Asylum, what'd you say?
I'd say like semi-performative.
Right, exactly. But it slows down for a little bit. You know, under Title 42, immigration obviously did slow down, but Title 42 was a pandemic era rule that was used by the Trump administration and continued way too long by the Biden administration to turn away people seeking asylum, fleeing political persecution from coming into the United States, basically under the guise of pandemic public health measures. Yep. And so it's a little bit hard to make that case when Biden has basically said we're moving on from COVID, we have no federal guidelines, to still claim that migrants are some sort of public health threat.
Back to work.
But Biden won't provide any other counter narrative, right? He's just continuing to say we do have a problem on the border. I'm going to work with Republicans on this front. And it doesn't really matter what he does. This is what we keep saying. Biden could be as right-wing as possible on the border, and Fox News Republicans like Greg Abbott would continue to say that he's not. This was the letter.
This logic has been, Bill Clinton and Obama both tried it.
Yeah.
Now they're open border presidents, according to Republicans.
Exactly. They'll always be that until you say what your differentiating policy is. What options are Democrats presenting that are distinct from Republicans? And right now, Abbott's just doing kind of old school Confederate stuff here. This was the letter that he sent out saying that he's not going to comply with the Supreme Court. He's not going to comply with the president, the executive branch. It all hinges on this false claim that this is essentially a war of migrants coming over the border. Let's put this letter up here. The federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states. Okay, so like we're talking that kind of language is it might ring a few bells historically, frankly. The executive branch of the United States has a constitutional duty to enforce federal laws protecting states, including immigration laws on the books right now. President Biden has refused to enforce those laws and has even violated them. There is no evidence presented for Biden refusing to enforce immigration laws or violating immigration laws.
All sorts of detentions.
Yes, there's absolutely no evidence for it, and he doesn't present it. So let's scroll down to the bottom here, because this is when he tries to make the constitutional claim. James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and the other visionaries who wrote the U.S. Constitution foresaw that states should not be left to the mercy of a lawless president who does nothing to stop external threats like cartels smuggling millions of illegal immigrants across the border. This is why the framers included both Article 4, yes, which promises that the federal government shall protect each state against invasion, and Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, which acknowledges the state's sovereign interest in protecting their borders. That is false, okay? So
invasion?
That is, first of all, it hinges on two false claims. One, that this is an invasion, that asylum seekers constitute an invasion. That is not true whatsoever. An invasion from some sort of foreign power, war declared against the United States, would not be in the form of people fleeing their nations because they are either too poor or too unsafe.
The record breakingness of traffic across border we're seeing is massively overstated. If this is an invasion, America has been so invaded the entirety of its lifetime.
Yes. So that is the false premise that this relies on as well, that he's not doing his duty to protect the states from invasion. The other false premise is what I just said, that Biden has failed to enforce immigration laws. He can't really cite any real data on this front. But when he cites Article 1, Section 2, it's quite clear that he's the one that is in violation of that. It says, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded or some imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Basically, the state is not allowed to engage in wartime practices outside of the federal government's jurisdiction. It makes it quite clear, but he is inverting that in his letter to the president and to the public. So Abbott is a real prick, but only to be outdone really by his attorney general, Ken Paxton, who spoke with Steve Bannon about their moves, essentially, to flip off Biden, and the administration, claiming they're collaborating with drug cartels and that this is what the administration is seeking. Kind of just great replacement theory adjacent BS.
What do you mean? What do you mean hide the numbers? They're numbers that we're not seeing publicly that are worse than the public numbers are horrible.
Last I looked at, yesterday, I didn't see the numbers for December on illegal immigration. The number of people that they brought into the country. I think the numbers that I heard leaked were the largest numbers that I think I've seen since the Biden administration started working with the cartels to get people here.
Yep. When you say working with the cartels, that's a pretty tough charge. I mean, you are the Attorney General of the state of Texas, one of the not just biggest but most important states in the union, an economic powerhouse. Did you just accuse the Biden administration of working with the cartels?
There may not be a written document that says that, but in fact, yes, that's exactly what they're doing. They have turned our border into a place where the cartels know that they can basically drop people off, and they're not trying to hide anymore. I mean, under all other administrations, they used to hide, they try to sneak across the border. Now they come straight to Border Patrol, and we're like a processing arm for the cartels. The cartels get paid per person and they make a lot of money on each person. And so the Biden administration is effectively, no matter how you want to slice this, they are partnering with the cartel to get people into our country as fast as possible. And the cartels have ramped it up because they make more money the more people they bring across. And that's why the numbers keep getting larger, because they know they've got a limited amount of time before Joe Biden's out of office. And the cartels are trying to partner as fast as they can with the federal government in getting people across the border. That's a fact.
It's not a fact, obviously.
The way he had to say it's essentially true.
Yeah, we don't have any documentation proving Biden's working with the cartels, but we just have vibes. Yeah, I mean, is it true that cartels and organized groups in Mexico, in other countries, in South America, Latin America, work with migrants trying to get to the United States and help get people across the border? Yeah, that's true. There's partly some of that, because people are desperately trying to flee their countries and seek asylum.
And guess what? Every time you increase so-called border security, whether in the 80s or 90s, it's doing speedboats in the Gulf of Mexico, or now it's building this wall across the entirety and putting razor wire in the Rio Grande, they get to extract a larger price. That's the only thing that's changed. That's 100%
the truth. I mean, you're creating a black market for the crossing of the border. If you had some sort of coherent asylum-seeking process where people could go through a system and make their case and still be able to like show up to their court date.
Yep.
Have a processing system, right? That as opposed to shooting people, putting up like booby traps so pregnant women drown in the Rio Grande as they get caught in razor sharp wire.
Yeah.
Then the black market cartel or, organized crime, as they call it, kind of system of people paying or doing the best they can to get across these very militarized borders, that's just going to increase that industry. I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah, and what's changed isn't that like all of a sudden the government is working to help people get into this country. What's changed is that there has been a sort of attitude towards refugees instituted by Stephen Miller and ratified now by the Biden administration that says we're going to look at people that come and seek refugee status as if there's some sort of invasion.
Yes, and I mean, to head off just a few of those, some of the points that the right makes for fentanyl, the great majority of fentanyl is trafficked through official ports of entry, not through the border, not through asylum seekers, not through frickin' Eagle Pass. That 6 million figure of migrants that crossed the southern border starting in October 2020 through the end of last year. Yeah. Of those, it was like around 320 migrants who had some sort of match to the terrorist watch list, and even that is not like a high security threat that the FBI would be setting off alarm bells about. I mean, that's a small figure, and we know how indiscriminate our terrorist watch lists are. Just ask Nelson Mandela, who was on it until 2008, if I'm not mistaken. So these are all, it's just fear mongering. And I return to the fact that when we covered Ron DeSantis's tough on migrant policies in Florida, and the fact that he had put in place this law, the Republicans down there, that would create some sort of penalty for business owners using migrants who are undocumented as a part of their workforce, that there was just this incredible uproar. We've covered a town hall where the business owners were freaking out. How can we do business and make money if we're not exploiting these people who are in socially precarious positions within the United States for cheap labor? And the reality is that is what the like dark underbelly of American capitalism really looks like. The more militarized the border is, the more precarious, the more scary a situation is for the average migrant living in this country, the more that capitalist bosses and the people that Republicans serve can use their immigration status as a cudgel and as something to hang over the head of the average worker. It's a way to discipline a labor force that already has zero protections because they're under the shroud of secrecy, and because we've decided that we're going to militarize the border instead of creating infrastructure to process human beings who are in many ways, by the way, fleeing circumstances that the United States created, whether it be by coups, whether it be by our war on drugs, what have you, whether it be by sanctions in Venezuela or meddling in elections in Haiti. It's insane. It's insane. And it really, and the fact that Biden isn't kind of looking at this from a 30,000-foot view really is a major failure.
It's every bit as sick as what we're seeing in Israel, just less acute, the way that we treat people who are, like this person saying they're invaders or some commodities of traffickers when really they're victims of our foreign policy. Talk about Venezuela, and we destroyed their oil industry because of the politics. And, you know, like I don't think I think the refugee thing and that sort of thing is important to emphasize over the labor thing. But I also will say that we do have somewhat of a labor shortage right now, and you don't see Republicans using that as an opportunity to strengthen labor rights. They're using it as an opportunity to loosen, say, child labor protections.
Exactly.
Because they're trying to squeeze anything we can out of it.
Interesting you say that, Matt, because just on Tuesday in the Florida legislature, the Florida State House was looking to pass a bill that would allow employers to schedule schedule 16 and 17-year-olds for shifts of more than 8 hours on a school night. So
Arkansas, Sarah Huckabee Sanders signed a law that removed paperwork requirements for underage workers. Who's that going to be for? Why would it's so there's more exploitation of kids, like the kid that died in the meat processing plant. I forget what state that was in, but go on, Bradley.
And and forget the fact that this so-called bipartisan immigration bill that would be used as the vehicle to allow for more funding for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan is not going to pass anymore, because every Republican has made the calculation that they want to wait for Trump to potentially win to have that be the political plank they can run on until Biden ostensibly loses the election.
Right.
That's one area in which they actually don't give a shit about what they call this so-called crisis at the border, because it's actually just for a tool for them to use against Democratic politicians, and they also don't give a shit about it because in lieu of actually doing anything to free up the bottleneck, maybe they can just hire a bunch of kids to do low-wage work for them overnight as they go to school.
Dead on, and that's the truth.